Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Hello Word, the podcast where we explore a new English word every episode to help expand your vocabulary and confidence. I'm your host, Alex, and today we're diving into the word acceptable. Acceptable is a B2 level adjective, meaning it's used frequently enough to be part of everyday language, yet it adds a bit more sophistication to how we describe things. So, what does acceptable actually mean? When we say something is acceptable, we mean it's satisfactory or good enough. It might not be amazing or exceptional, but it's decent and meets a basic standard or requirement. Now, let's talk about some synonyms for acceptable. A common one is adequate. For instance, the quality of this report is adequate. It meets all the requirements. Another synonym could be sufficient. You could say, the food at the event was sufficient to keep everyone happy. Another great synonym is tolerable. You might hear someone say, the movie was tolerable, but not something I'd watch again. Each of these synonyms gives us a similar sense that something is decent enough to get by, but might not be particularly outstanding. On the flip side, acceptable has some antonyms that show a clear contrast. Unacceptable is the most obvious one. If something is unacceptable, it's definitely not good enough. For example, turning in an assignment late is usually unacceptable in school. Another antonym could be inadequate, meaning it doesn't meet the minimum standards. You might say, the explanation he gave was inadequate for me to understand the concept. Another contrasting word is unsatisfactory. You might hear someone say, the customer service was unsatisfactory and needs improvement. How do we use acceptable in our daily lives? Imagine you're planning a gathering. You might say, the guest list is acceptable, but we could invite a few more people. Or, let's say you're in a meeting. You might hear, this proposal is acceptable, though we'll need to make some adjustments before finalizing it. In everyday expressions, you might also hear things like, is this temperature acceptable for everyone? Or it's not ideal, but it's acceptable under the circumstances. In each example, acceptable helps us convey that something meets a basic requirement or a level of quality, even if it's not exactly what we prefer. To wrap up, today we've explored the word acceptable, which means satisfactory or good enough. We covered synonyms like adequate, sufficient, and tolerable, and antonyms like unacceptable, inadequate, and unsatisfactory. I hope you found today's episode helpful, and I encourage you to try using acceptable in your own conversations. Thank you for tuning in to Hello Word. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the podcast and leave us a review. Your support really helps others discover the show. And here's a little challenge for you. Try using acceptable in a sentence of your own and share it with us in the comments. I can't wait to see what you come up with. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you in the next episode.